Hello, welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to be talking about string manipulation, which basically is we take a string, usually in a variable, in a string type, in a string data type, and we change the value of it dynamically, or we get some sort of information from it. These are called methods, again, because JavaScript is an object-oriented programming language. We use this thing called dot notation that allows us to access functions that are attached to strings or objects or arrays, things like that. So in this example, what I'm going to do is just create a very simple string. And I'm just going to call it str is equal to, and we could fill this with anything. So if you're following along, if you're typing along while I'm doing this too, feel free to enter anything in here. The blue blanket is sitting on the desk, right? Nice and simple. So when we type that back, str, we have the blue blanket is sitting on the desk. Nothing fancy. We know how to do that. Caleb, this is boring. I know. Now let's go ahead and see how many characters are in this, how many letters are in this. So if we type str.length, and you can tell that our browser is telling us that the length has to be from a string here, right? Or at least it's coming from a string. If we type enter, 39. There are 39 characters in here, not including the quotations. Those quotations are simply to show you that it's a string. Now, why is that important? Well, because one day when a user inputs some sort of information on your site, for example, Twitter, where you can only have 140 characters, it's important to make sure that their sentences or their tweet is only 140 characters. And this is the first form of validation. They would say, if the tweet length is less than or equal to 140, then they can go ahead and execute some more code. So now that's just finding a length. Pretty simple stuff. But what happens when we want to find a string inside of a string? So let's say we're looking for the word blanket. How do we find that? We could rip apart every single word and compare it in a loop, and it gets way too complicated. Things that you don't even know about yet really are completely unnecessary at this point. We can try this. String.index of, and let's put the word blanket in here. 9. What 9 means is that at the 9th letter in this sentence is where the word blanket is found. So we have THE and the word blue. Together that's 7 plus the spaces, 2 spaces before the letter B in blanket. Totals 9. So that's where the word starts. Now, if the word does not exist, what happens? If we type string index of, and let's type the word red, because there is no word red in our string, we get -1. So if something does not exist, we get -1. Now, do you think this is case sensitive or case insensitive? We haven't talked about this yet in JavaScript, so I want to know what you think. Is this case sensitive or case insensitive? Let's go ahead and test this out. String index of, and let's type the word blanket, but with a capital B. So it's different from this one. This one has a lowercase b, this one has an uppercase b. And let's see what the difference actually is when I hit enter. Does not exist. Now, that in itself can become very problematic, because you're not going to check every possible variation of the word blanket with different capitalization on different letters. It's not impossible, it's just a lot of work, and that's something you definitely want to stay away from. Programming is not meant to be a lot of work. It is meant to be nice and simple. So what do? We take string, and we can turn the entire sentence into lowercase, or the entire sentence into uppercase. For what we're testing here, it doesn't really matter. We just have to change what we're looking for exactly. So, as a first example, let's change this to lowercase. String dot to lowercase, and you have these rounded brackets here, these parentheses. Now, these parentheses means it's running a function or a method. And you see it here too. This one takes the parameter of blanket, red, blanket again. This one, dot length, is not a method. That comes when a string is formed. So it's actually a data point inside of it, and now you can tell that string is technically not a string, but it acts a lot like an object. Just like when we wrote in the last lesson that the person object has a name and an age and a favorite color, right? And we said person.name or person.age. This is string.length or string. whatever that other value is going to be. Very object orientated here. Now going back to our example, string to lowercase changes everything to lowercase. Well, there's only one letter in there, so this is actually a very bad example, but the first letter that was capitalized is no longer capitalized. Now what happens when we type str? It's back to normal. Now why is that? It's because it took your string, your sentence, it turned it lowercase and returned that value. We didn't store that in another variable. So let's type str lower is equal to str to lowercase. And this is just a simple variable name, and that's in camel case. And str lower. And now we have this accessible at any point in time because we've assigned another variable. Now if we tried str lower dot index of, and instead of typing blanket with a capital B, we know that all these letters, every letter in this sentence is going to be lowercase. We also check lowercase. It gives us a positive number, that means it exists. Or rather, it gives us a non-negative number, and that means it exists. Now, on the inverse, we can try this. String upper, new variable, is equal to string dot to uppercase. Now, we could use string, or we can use string lower. It doesn't matter because it's going to take all the letters and turn them into uppercase letters. It's going to capitalize everything. So let's try this. As you can see, the blue blanket is sitting on the desk. And now we have all uppercase letters. It's exactly what we want. Because if we did string dot index of, and we typed blanket in all caps, that still doesn't exist. Because str is set to be the proper way. It is still the same variable. Now we can override this, and variables, the beautiful thing about variables is you can override them at basically any point in time. Now I just hit the up arrow to get my last command there, and if I type string upper dot index of, it's looking for blanket in the string uppercase. String uppercase, we turned the lowercase version to uppercase, so it's trying to match this blanket with this blanket, and it found it at the 9th character. Now that's how you find a string inside of a string. Is that important? In a lot of cases, yes, that's very important. You're going to want to find strings inside of strings. That is not an uncommon task. I know, again, not the most exciting thing in the world. And we haven't even started really modifying anything on the DOM, the document object model, which is our web page. So we see on the left here, we have this big white box. Nothing has changed. And that's fine. We need to learn the principles before we can get to the fun stuff. Thankfully, the principles of programming don't actually take very long to learn. And the more languages you learn, the easier it is to pick up other languages. And again, things like index of, while the function might be different in other languages, the concept of trying to find a capitalized word like this one, blanket, in a string that is all capitalized is the same across every language. Now, I'm just going to clear this, type str again so that we can see what we're working with. What if we wanted to change str to instead be the blue blanket is sitting on the desk to just be a fragment of that? Well, I don't want to overwrite this yet because I'm still going to be using the str, the string variable. So instead, I'm going to write abc because I don't care what the variable name is at the moment, str.substring. We have two methods here. We're going to stick with the first one, substring, and this takes two parameters, where to start and where to end. Now, where should this start? Well, if we want to start at the very first letter, remember, this is the first one, and that's how we talk in human languages, but in programming languages, the first is the number 0. Comma, and then our second parameter. And where do we want to get? Well, we knew from the previous example that this here was the first 9 letters. And we could also count that out if we wanted to. But what if we wanted to get from, the blue blanket is sitting on the desk, from the blue blanket to somewhere in here. Now I'm just going to put in a random number. I'm going to put no thought into this just to show you how this works. We know that this is 39 characters long because we did string.length and we got 39. I hit enter and I get the blue blanket is. In fact, actually I want it to be a little bit longer. So instead I'm going to overwrite this. and I'm going to put it as 29. There we go. The blue blanket is sitting O. So we have from here all the way to here is 29 characters. And we can see that when we substring 0 to 29. Now you don't have to start with 0. You can do substring, and let's start at 10 and go to the next 10. So this is going to start at technically letter number 11 and is going to get the next 10 after that. Now we get blanket is. Look at that. So that's substring. Now is that important? In times, yes, that's very important. At other times, I mean, there are other methods to do this. You can also use string.slice. Let's check out what slice does. 10 and 15. So we entered string.slice and it starts at 10 and it's going to end at 15. The difference is substring starts at 10 and gets the next 10, whereas slice starts at 10 and ends at 15 starting from 0. Now, both slice and string don't require 2 parameters. They just need 1. 1 is mandatory. So if I said ABC is equal to string.substring, let's start that one at 12. It's going to start at 12, which is right there, and it's going to get the remainder. And if I typed ABC is equal to string.substring, a negative number, let's say minus 20, it's going to start here and work its way back. Now, slice is going to essentially do the exact same thing. If we type in slice 15, it starts at 15, goes to the end of the string. Or string.slice minus 15 starts at the back. Clear that again and show you what we're working with. Now, just a minute ago, when we said ABC is equal to string.substring, whatever the value was, we overwrote ABC over and over and over again, and that changes value over and over and over again. So that demonstrates how variables from our previous lesson are easily overwritten. All you have to do is type the same variable name is equal to something else and you overwrite it. Now what happens if you want to replace a string inside of a string? Well, JavaScript is pretty straightforward, so we just use .replace and we look for a word. Again, this is going to be case sensitive. We know that JavaScript is case sensitive from a previous example. And instead of using blanket, let's type pillow. So replace is looking for the word blanket, and it's going to try to replace it with the word pillow. What happens? The blue pillow is sitting on the desk. But what happens if the word is not found? What does it return? So we don't want to look for the word blanket. Instead, we want to look for any other word. Let's look for car and replace that with pillow. What happens? It just returns your string because nothing was replaced. It's just going to replace your string inside your string and return the entire thing back to you. Now, here's one more thing, is with strings, we can concatenate them. That means to take one string, one sentence, and append it to another string or sentence.